Most people think that there is only one way to make money in property, and that is you buy it, you hold it, you sit on it, and you pray and hope that it grows in value. Now, that's not how the best investors do it. There are actually 5 main ways to make money in property, and I see investors all the time make the mistake of buying a property using only one of these levers. Now, in this episode, I'm going to go through in detail through what these 5 levers actually are. So if you are out there looking to buy an investment property or maybe even build a property portfolio, you can take some value out of this episode and use this in your framework. Now, if you're new, my name is Nick V. I'm the founder and director of the Smash Property Investing Buyers Agency. We have been buying properties for ourselves for many, many years now, as well as for clients as well. So we've seen what works, we've seen what doesn't. And like I said, we're going to unpack in this episode the 5 main ways that you can make money in property. Now, need to get this out of the way. I'm a real estate investor with a real estate license. I'm not qualified to give you financial advice. So don't take what you see in this episode and base any financial decisions off that. Like I always say, validate all the information out there online, including mine, because what I might talk about in today's podcast might not be relevant, 1, 2, 3 years from now, for example. So best to just sense check all that information. If you get some value out of the episode, appreciate a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you are looking for Australian property investing content much like this. Now, again, if this is the second episode I've done from this studio here, it is a new studio that we're in. It's currently still in its raw form. There's bits and pieces lying everywhere. And like I said, I might get Akira on here to talk through, why we're doing this and how we got here. But for today's episode, I want to really just talk about these levers, and we'll start here with the levers first. Now, some of these are going to be very obvious. Some of these might not be so obvious depending on where you are on your journey. Now, you make money in property through a combination of the levers that I'm about to go through. You don't necessarily use them all, or maybe you can actually, but you don't need to, all right? So the first one is obvious. Everyone knows this. It's capital growth. So that's where the value of the asset that you buy grows in value over time. That difference between the debt on the property and the value of the property is your wealth, and that is the capital growth that you can get. Now, the second way is through cash flow, or otherwise known as the rental income from the property. Now, this is where the rental income minus the expenses leaves you with some level of surplus. Now, obviously, the more surplus, the more income that you are pocketing at the end of the day. That is obviously before tax and your tax situation. But another one of the most common ways that people are making money in property. Now, the third way is what we like to call manufacturing equity or manufacturing growth. Now, this is where you buy a property, you add some level of value to the property. We often talk about with clients, light cosmetic renovations. Now, you don't need to do this. It doesn't always equate to you getting an equal amount of growth out of that, but in many circumstances, it is a way to help supercharge the growth of your property. Got to be, I'd say a little bit more advanced. You don't need to be advanced. You just need to know what you're doing, right? You don't want to overcapitalize on that particular component, but that's the third way that you can make money in property. Now, the fourth way, and a very overlooked way, in my opinion, is debt reduction. Okay, so this is where you start reducing the principal amount of debt on the asset over time. Now, you might go, how's that a way to make money? Well, you're reducing your debt obligation, right? The debt's going down, the property's growing in value, and that spread is the wealth that you have. So don't ever sleep on debt reduction being a great way to make money in property in the long term. Now, the fifth way is not necessarily a way to make money. It's not necessarily the reason to buy. It's more a consequence of buying, and that is the tax outcomes or the structuring efficiency through the portfolio and the way that you've structured it. So what I mean is you might have a negatively geared portfolio. Okay, you might have a really high income, or any income really. Most of us are always paying tax. Now, the negative gearing component can reduce your taxable income and thus giving you more money in your pocket when it comes through to tax time. Or for example, if you have used a discretionary trust to go and purchase a property and you have multiple beneficiaries on there, there are ways, and this is not tax advice, where you can structure the distribution of those profits to make sure that you are not overpaying on tax, and another way to potentially leave you with more at the end of the day. So those are the 5 things: capital growth, cash flow, manufacturing equity, debt reduction, and tax outcomes or structuring efficiency. Now, the best investors that I see are never asking me, what suburb should I buy in? The best investors are asking, what lever matters most to me right now? And those are the 5 levers that I just spoke about. That's such an important mindset thing to start thinking about, because rookie investors, they want to know what's the hot suburb right now, whereas an advanced investors go, what do I need next to continue moving my portfolio forward? Really, really critical to get right. So let's deep dive a little bit further into these levers, and I'll talk about capital growth first. Now, this is the biggest wealth builder that you will see in real estate, period, bar none. Now, capital growth is essentially what is going to build your net worth. It is what is going to build your equity for the most part. Now, the growth or the capital growth or the net worth, whatever you want to call it, that is what is going to give you the options as the investor. That is what is going to get you to the goals that you have as an investor, whether it is that you refinance an existing asset that you have, whether you choose to sell down and profit from the capital gain, whether you use it to go and buy again, whether you use it for a buffer, reduce risk. Like, the list of what the equity or the growth can do for you is endless. And this is what, especially in the beginning, what investors need to be targeting if they have aspirations of being able to get closer to their goals. Most of the time, it's always some financial freedom element, right? What we choose to do with that time, that's when it differs for everybody. But most people just want that freedom, okay? Equity is what gives you that freedom. Now, the growth of your property portfolio is largely going to come through a couple of things. Historically speaking, the land component of an asset in real estate has been what is a large component of what is growing people's wealth, right? That scarcity component. And whilst that still reigns true today, it doesn't mean to say that you need to have a land component and it needs to be a big block of land. It doesn't need to be. There is a big shift in real estate at the moment with affordability, and large freestanding houses are largely becoming unaffordable. The cash flow on them isn't so great, and therefore a lot of people are now pivoting towards units, townhouses, and there is a lot of growth in those particular markets. Why? Because there's some scarcity related to those types of assets. So scarcity is really one of the largest components of capital growth throughout real estate history, and it will continue to be so. The second component is you've got strong demand, right? Which is linked to the scarcity component, all right? So a lot of people want one thing. That one thing is going to increase in value because there's more people willing to pay more money for it. Same thing applies here in real estate as well. A lot of growth is also going to come from areas where incomes are increasing, population is increasing. Okay, you've got more people with more money. Therefore, they're willing to pay more for the assets that are in the areas that they would like to live. Some other relevant drivers for growth are infrastructure developments. Think big new train lines, new freeways, easier road access in and out of the areas that you're looking to buy. And obviously, employment drivers as well. Okay, employment comes into the area, followed by more people with more money, and you get the picture that the assets in the area do grow in value as well. And another little piece that people tend to forget about sometimes is that areas that have a larger owner-occupier appeal do grow in value, I would say, at a more rapid rate than other, larger tenant driven areas. Now, the reason is owner-occupiers, they buy with emotion, okay? They're buying because they have a connection to the area. It's a family lives there, or there's nice schools, maybe it's close to work, whatever it is. And that's when they're not looking at it from an investor lens of purely what the numbers are saying. They're looking at it, thinking and feeling, living in the area. And with that emotion comes higher prices for the assets that you are buying. Now, people can still get this wrong, even though what I mentioned was relatively simple. It's not really groundbreaking, particularly, even for novice investors out there. But where people get this wrong, especially today, is they want to chase either, the cheapest suburb out there. Don't get me wrong, cheap suburbs can be good and they have been good to me, but it's not always the way. They want to chase, the next data-driven hotspot or whatever it might be. Now, they're confusing low price with value in these particular circumstances. So you got to pull yourself out of, trying to perfect the next location, boom, as everyone sees out there on socials these days, and just stick with the fundamentals that I just spoke about, right? You get that right, you're going to do quite well from a capital growth standpoint, particularly over the long term. Now, if we go and look at lever 2, okay, this was when we were talking about cash flow or the rental income from the property. This matters a lot. Cash flow is important. Whilst growth is what is going to get us towards the goals that we have, the cash flow is essentially going to allow us to maintain the debt levels that we have. Okay, now if the cash flow is really shit on a property, the alternative for you is having a really large income to offset the difference from the rental income. So cash flow, I think now more than ever, with interest rates that have just gone up recently and potentially looking at going up even further in the next, throughout 2026, this is really, really important to get right for your specific circumstance. So like I mentioned, cash flow helps us to hold the property. It doesn't get us closer to our goals. It just helps us maintain the debt levels that we have. Now, if you have holding power, you can survive interest rate rises like we are seeing right now and have seen over the last few years. And long term, that is a winning combination because you've got, you've held an asset through one or two market cycles. You have now increased your net worth significantly. That is, I guess, the formula that investors need to be considering when buying and growing their real estate portfolio. Now, the rental income can significantly and materially improve the sustainability of your portfolio. And I keep stressing this point because a lot of people, when we first started opening the business, were like, oh, I want a positive cash flow property, right? Thinking that they were just going to stack 10 properties that gave them $100 per week positive after all the expenses. And, there's their $1,000 a week, they're $52,000 a year, and they were kind of home free. That particular strategy might have worked, 2008 type thing, but the assets nowadays don't allow, for the most part, buying those kind of assets and being able to grow the wealth over time, right? But being able to have a strong cash flow that doesn't allow the asset to burn a hole in your pocket, that's the important bit, and it allows you to continue scaling. So the rental yields of the property, this is another one where people get caught out because there's a difference between gross yield and net yield. Okay, gross yield is just simply the rent against the overall purchase price of the property. The net yield is what you really want to be looking at because that takes into account your rates, your insurance, your maintenance, your body corporate fees, if it's relevant for the asset that you're buying, the property manager fees, all those sort of things where people tend to overlook. They eat into your cash flow quite significantly. It's not just the mortgage, it's all these other things that we need to factor in as well. Now, if we're focusing purely on, like I mentioned a second ago, purely on assets that have a high rental yield, these high yielding properties are typically in locations where there is very poor tenant demand, right? There's very low, very high vacancy rates for the most part, not always, but it's a broad sort of level assumption there. Now, the high yielding properties that I've seen, they're in areas that don't necessarily have amazing capital growth. The vacancy rates can be typically quite high. The high yielding properties are typically on the cheaper end of the market because of the price difference to the rental income. Now, I have bought these types of properties in areas where they're, I've got a property in WA. After all expenses is paying me about 10 grand a year. Okay. But that property in the 2 and a bit years that I've owned it has really only grown by maybe 100 grand. You might think that's amazing, but properties that I would buy in other locations are growing by like 100, 150 grand every year, not every couple of years. So there is a big difference with that. So that's why it's always important to focus on not what area you want to buy, but what is it that you need next on your portfolio. Now, the reason I bought that property, I think 7, maybe 8 properties in, I needed a cash flow asset. And that's why I went down that particular path. So the rental yield isn't going to make you rich on its own, but very poor cash flow is going to kill your portfolio. It's going to stop you dead in your tracks. So it's really important to make sure, and I always talk about just having that balance between, okay, you need some growth assets to continue growing your wealth, but you also need cash flow to help balance out the portfolio, unless you have an amazing income, then more power to you. So one of the good frameworks that you can sort of go with and ask yourself is, can you comfortably hold this asset if rates stay higher for longer? So if you've bought a property with the expectation that rates are going to come back down, can you sustainably hold it if rates don't? Okay. Does the property improve or damage your ability to buy again? And it might obviously eat into your borrowing power, but it might be eating into your borrowing power whilst building your wealth and building that equity so you can eventually go again once you have the serviceability to do so. Now, if the rent, you got to ask yourself, is the rent sustainable and supported by real demand of the area? So, one of the dangers could be with, for example, mining towns is it's just heavily reliant on the one employer in the area. Now, if something happens to that employer, then it's going to soak up all the jobs in the area, and the rent that you're getting isn't sustainable over the long term. So some things to ask yourself with that particular lever. Now, lever number 3, manufacturing equity. This is where the sophisticated investors can really speed up or supercharge their game when it comes to growing their portfolio. Now, a couple of ways that you can manufacture equity is buying under market value or buying below comparable sale value, right? This is where you have to be able to negotiate well. You have to understand the vendor's motivation. And all the agents as well. Sometimes agents just don't really feel like selling a property. They might not be in the area that the property is being sold. They just want to get it off their books. All right. There are lots of different ways that you can approach buying under market value or buying below comparable sale value. We do this all the time, and you don't have to have an off-market deal to do this. You can find them on realestate.com as long as you know what you're looking for. So that's a great way to do it. I always say make money on the way in to buying the property that you're looking at. The other way through manufactured equity is the cosmetic renovation. Now, what I like to do is I like to buy below market value. So we bought 5, 10, 15, whatever thousand below comparable sale value. We then do a cosmetic renovation. So we then supercharge the growth on top of that difference that we've just bought it as well. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about paint, carpet, maybe fixtures and fittings, all these light things that just update the look and feel of the property. A couple of things can happen. You can increase the rent on the property depending on the area and the feasibility study that you've done prior, or depending on the area and what you do, and depending on the bank that you're working with, you could potentially increase the overall value of the property and therefore the equity as well. So not only have you bought it below what it's actually worth, you've then sort of supercharged and manufactured your own growth through this like cosmetic renovation. Now, it doesn't always work. You need to know what you're doing, and you've got to have the right combination of the right amount of uplift, the right lender to continue being able to do that. Now, there are other more advanced things that you can do. Say you've bought a 2-bedder, you can add a 3rd bedroom on if you're able to do that. Or maybe you've bought a 3-bedder on a big block of land, you can maybe do the secondary dwelling. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to. It's not for everyone. Sometimes it is better to just continue accumulating your assets and then go back, 5-10 years later and do the secondary dwellings, which is one of the things that I've done in my portfolio. Now, I got to stress this because not all renovations create value. It's not like you put $1 in and you're always going to get 2 back. It doesn't always work that way. There are some people that have just renovated and overcapitalized on a property and got nowhere out of it because they've just put too much money in based on what the area and the people in the area are demanding. So the goal isn't just to spend money and uplift the property to the taste that you have. The goal is to create equity in the property. You've got to make sure that you're thinking about that and get a better ratio and a better equity ratio than what you spend. Okay, so this is where doing a feasibility assessment before is critical because maybe the reno is not going to do anything for you, right? And that's a reality. So you got to think about, okay, if you spend 60 grand, what is the realistic uplift? Like, are you going to get 60 grand back out or are you going to get 120 grand back out in terms of value? All right. So this is where, like I've said, your due diligence matters when you're buying and going into a property with this in mind. Because the value add, you can do all the numbers on paper and you're like, yeah, this is going to be mad. But the reality of it, if you don't get the zoning right or the approvals right, you don't manage risk correctly, it can get stuck really quick and then you're going to just be in a really shit position. So I love this one, but you've got to be very careful about how you manufacture the equity. Now, lever number 4, the one I've said is often overlooked, all right? Because it's the most boring one out there, okay? It's an important one, okay? If we eliminate debt, we're putting ourselves in probably a far better position than any other one of these levers out there. Now, there's I think a balance to this because there was a few years ago I was looking at should I buy another property or should I reduce the debt that I have? Because at that time I didn't really understand debt the way that I do now, and I wanted to get rid of it as quickly as I could. When I looked at the rate that I could pay down my debt versus the rate that if I bought a property, how quickly it will grow in value, the difference was staggering because whilst I could be eliminating my debt and growing my wealth, buying another asset at that time, even now really, that asset is going to grow far greater than our ability to save for the most part, right? And I was on a pretty decent income at the time. And so I thought, okay, instead of me trying to eliminate debt, I go and buy an asset with the idea that that asset one day will grow enough in value that I can potentially sell down and wipe down the debt of my remaining property portfolio. That was the strategy that I have used personally and one that I still use today. Not that I'm recommending that, but it's just like, you just got to weigh out where you are and what maths equation works for your specific circumstance. So now, in terms of actually paying down the debt here, now a large part of your rental income or the tenant is going to be contributing to reducing the debt if you've got a principal and interest repayment. Okay, so if you've got a P&I repayment, naturally you are going to start reducing the debt slowly over time. Now, this is going to quietly in the background build equity and improve your position week on week, month on month, year on year. All right, this is if you've got principal and interest. So this is great if you want to slowly but surely reduce the risk that you have exposure to debt over time. And it's great for long-term portfolio stability. Now, it's not the fastest way to grow your wealth, but it is one of the most stable and secure ways because, I mean, what more can I say? You're reducing your debt, which is increasing the net wealth, net position that you have. Now, if you have an interest-only loan and you are trying to do this, well, it's in the name. Obviously, you are paying interest only. The principal amount stays the same. So if you want to use this lever, you need to make sure that your loans are structured in the right way. And I'm not a mortgage broker, but speak with your broker, right? Principal and interest does make sense if you are looking to do that. Interest only is good if you did what I did and you want to continue growing your portfolio. You're not too fussed about paying debt off right now, okay? So plenty of investors that I see underestimate how powerful borrowing is in property. Okay, if you're just consistently reducing debt over a long time of you doing that, you can shorten your loan from 30 years to well under 20, if not well under 15 years if you're doing this correctly, which is huge, right? I know, like, when I first started investing in property, like 15 years felt like ages. It just felt like, man, let alone 30 years. But the reality is, like, I mean, the older you get, the quicker time seems to go, and 5, 10, 15 years all of a sudden doesn't really seem so long. So imagine now, like, I was gonna say I'm close to 40. I'm not really close to 40, but well, kind of am. In 15, let's say I was 40, which I'm not. Let's say in 15 years, what am I? 50, 55, right? So, that's still very young. You can do shit ton of cool stuff still at that age. So it's like, debt reduction is not silly, okay? Don't sleep on it. Now, lever number 5 is the tax outcome or the structuring outcome that you can potentially get from your property portfolio. Now, tax benefits improve cash flow. Okay, they don't necessarily grow our wealth. It just allows us to get more cash back through depreciation, through deductions, than as opposed to making us more wealthier. Now, cash flow is great. As I said, it helps balance out our portfolios and it helps us manage the debt that we have. Now, I got to be very clear. Negative gearing is not a property investing strategy. All right. Losing money to get a bit back on tax is it's not a way to invest. It's just an outcome or a side effect, if you like, of doing this. Now, the tax should support a good investment. Okay. It should be supporting you, not saving you from a shit investment. Okay. And I'll say it again. The tax outcome should be supporting you on your portfolio journey, not rescuing you because you've got a shit cash flow on an investment. So important to get right. Always involve a good quality accountant when you are looking, before you even bought your first property, I would say, because I've seen a lot of instances where, someone might have an accountant that they've used for years and years and years when they were on, pretty simple, structures and all that sort of thing. That accountant, I'm not saying that they're bad, but they're just not used to seeing and helping people build wealth outside of just their 9-to-5 PAYG income. Okay. So you want to find someone who's able to help you grow, who has, done it themselves, or they've got clients that have done it themselves too. So you never want to buy a bad asset because the tax outcome looks good, right? I see people way too often than I would like. They want to go, I want to buy a property because I want to claim depreciation. I just look at them, I'm not the guy for you, right? Because that's just a silly way to get into it. Okay, you get into property because you're looking to build your wealth, not reduce your taxable income. Okay, like I said, tax is the side benefit. It's the side quest from real estate. Okay, it's not the moment or the reason, I should say, that you should be investing. If you get some value out of the episode so far, appreciate a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. There's something like, 60, 70, 80% of you that watch this are not subscribed just yet. Now, the real game and what I see a lot of successful investors do is they stack these levers up that I've just gone through. Okay. So the best properties that you can purchase as an investor are generally going to stack, 2, 3, or 4 of these levers up in one deal. So for example, you might have a great growth property with a solid cash flow. And you just think about Vincent we spoke with last week. His main goal when he came to buy his 5th property was the cash flow component, but we also managed to get him amazing growth out of that same property as well. Now, another combination, you might be like, okay, I'm going to buy in a growth area, but I've bought it well and therefore I've got instant equity, right? I've bought it below comparable sale value and I get that manufactured growth as well. Or maybe you buy it in a growth area, you buy it below comparable sale value, you do some value add, things to the property and you increase the rent as well. Love that component, okay? Or maybe more advanced is you buy in a growth area with development potential, okay? So the secondary dwelling to increase the cash flow of the property. You might do that now. You might do that 5, 10, 15, whatever years down the line. Now, there's a couple of examples here of, okay, like these might be all cool, Nick, but when do I use them? Like, what do I do with it? Now, if you're, for example, a first-time investor, okay, you might be prioritizing holdability. Okay, so you might be looking at, all right, I want growth, but I also don't want this to burn a hole in my pocket. So I'm going to find something that gives me that balance of good growth, good cash flow, and it's got just the solid fundamentals there. So I can just buy it, don't have to do any value add things, no renos, no like secondary dwellings, but I can just kind of keep it there, and it's going to consistently and stably grow my wealth over time. That might be a good example for a first-time investor. Something that I would personally avoid as a first-time investor is just something that's overly complicated. So, first-time investors, in my opinion, should avoid buying, with a development in mind, buying with, I'm going to build a granny farm, I'm going to do a reno, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Just keep it simple, in my opinion, in the beginning. Now, investor B, you might be time poor, earning really good money. This is where you'd want to prioritize growth, low drama, right? Easy to hold. You might want to look at how you're going to sequence this portfolio over time. So you might be able to buy like 1, 2, 3 properties, which we've done for many people in time. Now, this is where you want to avoid like, okay, if you've got a really good income, yield isn't really too important right now in the beginning. It might be a property, say 3, 4, or 5, but the first, couple of properties, high growth, no stress, no drama. You just park them there and you stack them up. Now, investor C might be really experienced. They might have borrowing capacity constraints. And this is where buying a property with the good, strong cash flow support, you might want to manufacture some equity there as well. So you get both, tick both of those boxes. You might be looking at the secondary dwelling or the dual income or the strategic value add at that point in time for the more experienced investor. Now, the best strategy is not the one that sounds hectic online, all right? The best strategy is the one that moves you forward as the investor, right? It helps you to buy well, hold the property that you've got, and buy again. That's the best asset. Now, there is no one size fits all with this, right? Like every single person is in a different circumstance and needs something different for their own property portfolio. Now, a couple of mistakes that are very common that I see all of the time is that people buy on emotion, right? Especially investors that are new, they've never done this before. It's easy to get caught up in the emotion of it all. Believe me, I've been there. But this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see. They don't like the paint of the thing. They don't like whatever, just silly emotional things that would matter to us if we're going to go and live in it, but we're not. I see this mistake all the time. Now, a lot of investors I see, they start with the right, focusing on the suburb that they're going to buy, and they don't focus on strategy. Okay. This is, the suburb that's right for me might not be right for you. Just keep that in mind. Think strategy first, suburb second. The third thing I see a lot is people only focused on rental yield. Okay. I don't want this property to cost me anything. Like, I want to buy it. I want it to make me $100, $200 a week. Okay. That is a very old school strategy, and you can still do that today to some degree, but you're buying in extremely remote, isolated areas that do that. Okay. Again, not great for the first time investor. Now, a lot of people tend to skip or not understand what doing due diligence is on a property and assessing risk. Okay. And I'm not just talking about your building and pest inspection. That is important to do, but it's not the only thing that you need to do. So don't skimp on doing proper due diligence. If you want to know what real due diligence looks like, let me know in the comments and I'll do a video on what we do at Smash Property. Now, a lot of people I've seen, not personally, but this is where you kind of hear secondhand stories of just overcapitalizing on the renovation uplift of the property, right? They reno the property as if they're going to live in it. And if you're not going to live in it, what's the point, right? You want to just do enough so that you can increase enough and extract enough value out of it, so that you can continue moving forward. Value being increasing the rental yield, or even better, increasing the bank valuation of the property. So your first property, don't focus on this being like perfect, okay? Because the reality is it is never going to be perfect. I've bought dozens of properties, right? Like, there is no such thing as the perfect asset for anyone. It just needs to be strategic. It just needs to move you forward. That is it. Now, if you are looking to get into the market and you need help building a strategy, you need help executing on it, conducting all the due diligence, making sure that everything is handled in a professional way like an experienced investor would, that is what the team and I specialize in at Smash Property Investing. Now, if you want help on that journey, there is a link in the description where you can book yourself a 10-minute clarity call. We'll just understand a bit about you. Can we help you execute on what it is that you're looking to do? Sometimes we can, and we'll explain how that looks, and sometimes we can't because of certain circumstances, and we'll just tell you straight. All right, so you got nothing to lose. We can get you into the market and turn you into a successful property investor. If that is of interest, like I mentioned, there is a link in the description, both on YouTube and Spotify. But if you got this far in the video, I appreciate you. Drop a like, consider subscribing if you haven't already. Like I said, I'm Nick V, the founder and director of Smash Property Investing. That's all for this week. Until next time, thanks so much for watching. Catch you soon.